Number 1. Thalattoarchon Saurophagis. The name was chosen to sound like a threat. It means ruler of the seas that eats lizards, and the animal earned every syllable. In 2013, a team led by Nadia Fröbisch and Jörg Fröbisch, working with Martin Sander, Lars Schmitz, and Olivier Riepel, published its description in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The fossil came out of the Augusta Mountains of Nevada, from a rock layer called the Fossil Hill Member. Today, that ground is high desert. 244 million years ago, in the Middle Triassic, it was the floor of an open tropical ocean. This was an Ichthyosaur, a marine reptile that breathed air and gave birth to live young at sea. It measured around 8.6 meters, roughly the size of a modern killer whale. The recovered skeleton includes the skull, a long stretch of vertebrae, ribs, and part of the hip. The teeth are the key. Each one carries 2 cutting edges, the design of a blade rather than a hook. A fish-eater grips. This animal sliced. The proportions of its jaw show it could take prey its own size, or larger. That single ability is what separates an ordinary hunter from an apex predator, the animal at the very top with nothing above it. Now consider the timing, because this is the part that unsettles researchers. Thalattoarchon appeared only about 8 million years after the end Permian mass extinction, the worst die-off this planet has ever suffered. The old assumption held that giant apex predators needed tens of millions of years to claw their way back. Here was proof that the sea rebuilt its full multi-level food web almost as soon as the dust cleared. The skull alone is estimated at around a meter in length. Around it, the Fossil Hill rocks preserve coiled ammonoids and other ichthyosaurs, the supporting cast of a complete functioning ecosystem. Some researchers read this as evidence of astonishingly rapid recovery. Others argue the recovery was patchy and this was a local exception. A few fringe voices even claim the extinction itself was overstated. The mainstream view is simply that life, given any opening, races to fill the role of monster. Picture an orca evolving in a geological blink in a world still scarred by mass death. And if that timeline disturbs you, the next site is stranger still, because it may be the oldest sea monster graveyard on Earth. Number 2. The Berlin Ichthyosaur Graveyard. In a quiet canyon in central Nevada lies one of the eeriest scenes in all of paleontology. Berlin Ichthyosaur State Park in West Union Canyon protects the bones of dozens of enormous marine reptiles lying together in the rock. The animal is Shawnosaurus popularis, named Nevada's official state fossil in 1977. It was a giant, reaching about 15 meters, among the largest ichthyosaurs ever found. These were the late Triassic creatures, from the Norian stage, somewhere between 217 and 227 million years old. The main excavations were carried out by Charles Camp of the University of California, Berkeley, through the 1950s and 60s. Camp uncovered a jumble of huge skeletons packed into a single bed, and ever since, scientists have argued about how they got there. In 2011, the mystery turned strange. Mark McMenamin presented an idea at a Geological Society of America meeting that he called the Triassic kraken. He noticed that some vertebrae seemed arranged in repeating, almost geometric patterns. He proposed that a giant squid, or octopus-like predator, had killed the ichthyosaurs and deliberately arranged their bones, a kind of self-portrait in vertebrae. Most paleontologists rejected it immediately. There is no body fossil of any such monster cephalopod, and arranged bones can form by ordinary water movement. The claim could not be tested, and that is its fatal flaw. A more grounded interpretation says the bed records many deaths spread across a long span of time, not one dramatic massacre. Then, in 2022, Neil Kelly and Nicholas Pineson and their colleagues offered a gentler and more powerful idea in the journal Current Biology. They suggested the canyon was a breeding ground, a place these animals returned to in order to give birth. Their evidence included tiny embryos and newborns preserved alongside the adults. Modern whales do exactly this, gathering in safe waters to calve generation after generation. The deaths here may have accumulated over thousands of years at a recurring gathering site. The rock itself was deep marine sediment, later lifted into the mountains. Adult Shawnosaurus had a long, weakly toothed snout hinting at suction feeding on soft prey. So we have 3 competing stories: a nursery, a series of strandings, and a kraken. The skeletons still lie where they died, sheltered under a barn-like roof. And the next monster takes us from the desert to the frozen Arctic. Number 3. Predator X. Far north on the frozen island of Spitsbergen in the Svalbard archipelago, a Norwegian team pulled a sea monster out of the permafrost. The bones came from the Slottsmoya member of the Agardfjelli Formation, rocks of the late Jurassic, from the Tithonian stage, around 147 to 149 million years old. The excavation was led by Jørn Hurum of the Natural History Museum at the University of Oslo, across field seasons from roughly 2006 to 2008. Before it had a proper name, the press called it Predator X, and the nickname stuck. In 2012, it was formally described as Pliosaurus funki by Espen Knudsen, Patrick Druckenmiller, and Hurum. The species name honors Bjørn and May-Lis funki, the volunteers who first spotted the bones weathering out of the ground. This was a pliosaur, a body plan built like a nightmare. Short, thick neck, enormous head, 4 powerful flippers driving a barrel of muscle. It measured somewhere around 10 to 12 meters. The skull alone was about 2 meters long, set with teeth the size of cucumbers. Early reports claimed a bite force around 33,000 pounds, a figure later researchers treated with real caution, since such numbers come from models and assumptions, not from measuring a living jaw. 2 main specimens were recovered from the site. What makes this find so striking is the setting. This was a cold, high-latitude Jurassic Sea, not the warm tropical water you might expect a giant predator to favor. The same rocks yielded long-necked plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs, an entire frozen ecosystem with field crews giving some specimens nicknames as they worked. Among the European species of Pliosaurus, the Svalbard animal stands near the top for sheer size. Digging it out of frozen ground in one of the most remote places on Earth was brutal work. The payoff was a clear message that apex plesiosaurs ruled even the polar oceans, crushing other marine reptiles in their jaws. The debate over its bite has 3 threads: the original headline-grabbing hype, the tempered scientific modeling that followed, and the simple agreement that whatever the exact number, this animal could bite through almost anything it met. Hold that image of a 2-meter skull. Because the next find is only a fragment of a jaw, and yet it points to something even bigger. Number 4. The Lilstock Giant. In 2016, a fossil collector named Paul de la Salle was walking the foreshore at Lilstock on the Somerset coast of England when he found pieces of a strange, curved bone. He had the patience to collect every fragment over several visits. In 2018, those pieces were described in the journal Plus One by Dean Lomax, de la Salle, Judy Massare, and Ramu Gallois. The bone turned out to be a syringular part of the lower jaw of a giant ichthyosaur. It came from the very end of the Triassic, the Rhaetian stage, around 202 to 205 million years old. The fragment alone is about 96 centimeters long. By scaling it against a known giant ichthyosaur called Shawnosaurus siccaniensis, the team estimated the living animal at somewhere between 20 and 26 meters. That is approaching the size of a blue whale, the largest animal known to have ever lived. Sit with that. A reptile more than 200 million years ago may have rivaled the biggest creature in Earth's history. The study did something else remarkable. It reached back into the 1800s and solved an old mystery. For roughly 150 years, several large bones found at Ostcliffe near Bristol had puzzled scientists. They had been labeled limb bones of dinosaurs, or of some other large reptile. Lomax and his colleagues argued that these too were jaw fragments of giant ichthyosaurs, not dinosaur bones at all. A century and a half of misidentification corrected by a fresh comparison. These leviathans lived just before the end. Triassic mass extinction swept the seas. Their gigantism rivaled whales, but evolved 200 million years earlier in a completely different branch of life. Because only fragments survive, the true size stays uncertain, and that uncertainty is part of the unease. We are staring at a creature known mostly from a single broken jawbone, imagining the rest. If the estimate holds, it implies a whole hidden guild of blue whale scale reptiles cruising the late Triassic Ocean, feeding on fish and squid. Dean Lomax, who led the work, has become one of the most recognized ichthyosaur specialists alive. 3 readings remain on the table: a cautious size, a maximal size, and the honest possibility that the fragment is simply too incomplete to be sure. The next animal is no myth of scale. It is a fish that should not be possible. Number 5, Edestus. Some prehistoric animals look invented, as if someone designed them to be impossible. Edestus is one of them. It swam the warm, shallow seas of the Carboniferous period around 300 million years ago. It belonged to a group called the Eugeneodontids, the same broad family as the famous spiral-toothed Helicoprion. What set Edestus apart were its teeth. Instead of a normal mouthful of replaceable points, it grew curved brackets of teeth along the midline of both the upper and lower jaw. And here is the strange part. It did not shed its teeth the way most sharks do. New teeth pushed the old ones forward, so the animal carried a growing curl of its entire dental history in its mouth. The upper and lower tooth blades passed each other when the jaws closed, shearing like a pair of garden shears or pinking scissors. The largest species, Edestus giganteus, may have reached around 6.7 meters. For a long time, nobody could agree on how it actually fed, because no complete skeleton has ever been found. Sharks are built from cartilage, which rarely fossilizes, so Edestus is known almost entirely from those bizarre teeth. The breakthrough came from Leif Tapanila and Jesse Pruitt at Idaho State University, who used scanning and modeling to test how the jaws worked. They proposed a vertical slashing motion, the animal driving its head down and up to slice prey as the blades met. The wear and breakage on the teeth matched the act of cutting flesh, not crushing shells. The remains turn up in marine black shales across North America. The genus was first named back in the 1850s from isolated tooth whorls that collectors could barely interpret. Popular media now calls it the scissor-tooth shark, which is exactly right. Its cousin Helicoprion took the same basic idea even further, coiling the lower teeth into a buzzsaw spiral tucked inside the jaw. Together they show how early cartilaginous fish experimented with extreme, almost alien dental engineering, long before the sharks we know today. Edestus most likely sliced soft-bodied midwater prey, fish, and similar animals, with each pass of its blades. Researchers still debate the details, whether the motion was a pure vertical slash, a side-to-side cut, or whether the whorl also served in display or defense. Whatever the truth, it is a reminder that evolution has tried designs we would never dream up. And the next animal pushes anatomy to a different extreme, not in teeth, but in neck. Number 6. Albertonectes Vanderveldei. If you want a fossil that genuinely warps your sense of how an animal can be built, look at Albertonectes. It was an elasmosaur, a type of long-necked plesiosaur, and it holds a record that is hard to even picture. This animal had 76 vertebrae in its neck, more than any other creature ever discovered, alive or extinct. The neck alone stretched over 7 meters, and the whole body reached around 11 meters. It came from the Bear Paw Formation of Alberta, Canada, a marine shale laid down in the late Cretaceous, in the Campanian stage, roughly 70 to 73 million years old. The fossil was uncovered in 2007 not by a research expedition, but by commercial mining. It was found at a Corsite mine near Lethbridge, where workers dig for ammonite, the gem-quality rainbow-colored shell of fossil ammonites. The skeleton was described in 2012 by T. Kubo, Mark Mitchell, and Donald Henderson. Strangely, the skull was never recovered, so we know this animal almost entirely from the neck down. Yet what survives is beautifully complete and still articulated, the bones lying in their natural order. A neck like that raises an obvious question: what is it for? The leading idea is stealth. By keeping its huge body far back and easing only its small head toward a school of fish, the animal could get close before the prey scattered. Despite its length, the neck was relatively stiff, not a flexible snake. It could not whip around the way old illustrations suggested. Albertonectes swam by flapping 4 wing-like flippers, flying through the water rather than paddling. The sea it lived in was the Bear Paw, part of the Great Western Interior Seaway that once split North America down the middle. Among elasmosaurs, this specimen is one of the best preserved we have. Think about the comparison for a moment. This neck held more bones than the neck of the longest sauropod dinosaurs, the giants of the land. Exactly how it fed and how it controlled such a structure is still debated. Some researchers favor stealth feeding, others suggest it raked the seafloor for small prey, and a few have proposed the long neck played a role in display. What is certain is that plesiosaurs push neck elongation to a biological extreme that still looks barely plausible. And if a 7-meter neck unsettles you, the next reptile took the same idea and made it stranger. Number 7. Tanystropheus Hydroides. Tanystropheus has one of the strangest silhouettes in the entire fossil record. It was a marine reptile of the Middle Triassic, around 242 million years old, best known from Monte San Giorgio, a celebrated fossil site on the border between Switzerland and Italy. Its neck was about 3 meters long, which sounds odd until you learn the rest. That neck was longer than its body and tail combined. Stranger still, the whole 3-meter length contained only 13 vertebrae, each one enormously elongated and stiffened by thin rod-like extensions. This was not a flexible swan-like neck. It was closer to a rigid pole. For decades, scientists could not even agree on where this creature lived. Some pictured it on land, using the long neck to snatch prey from cliffs or trees. Others placed it in the water. The argument ran for generations. The resolution came in 2020 in a study led by Stefan Speakman, working with Olivier Riepel and Nick Fraser. They took a skull that had been crushed flat and used computed tomography scanning to reconstruct it in 3 dimensions, rebuilding the head almost like restoring a fossil from a pile of broken glass. The reconstructed skull told the story. The nostrils sat high on the snout, and the jaws held curved, interlocking teeth ideal for catching slippery fish and squid. This was an aquatic ambush predator. The same study resolved a second-old puzzle. Researchers had long known 2 size classes of Tanystropheus and assumed they were juveniles and adults of one species. Growth rings in the bones revealed they were actually 2 separate species. The large form, Tanystropheus Hydroides, reached around 6 meters. The small form, Tanystropheus longobardicus, stayed under 1.5 meters and fed on tiny, shrimp-like prey. The name Hydroides nods to the Hydra, the many-headed serpent of myth. The animal most likely hung still in the water and lunged its small head forward at passing prey, while the bulk of its body stayed back and hidden. Some neck fossils even show bite marks, suggesting predators struck at that long, vulnerable neck. Monte San Giorgio preserves all of this in fine black shale, capturing a whole Triassic marine world in exquisite detail. The rigid, impossibly long neck defies every intuition we have about how a body should be arranged. The leading view now is aquatic ambush, though debate continues over how the neck moved. From a single strange animal, the next find widens to an entire seafloor of death. Number 8. Sharktooth Hill. Near Bakersfield in Kern County, California, the ground hides a graveyard of the sea. It is called the Sharktooth Hill Bone Bed, and it is one of the richest marine fossil deposits anywhere on Earth. The fossils come from a rock unit called the Round Mountain Silt, laid down in the Middle Miocene, roughly 15 to 16 million years ago. The heart of the site is a single thin layer, the main bone bed, packed so densely with bones and teeth that it almost defies belief. This layer spreads across an area measured in the tens of square kilometers. Dig into it, and you find the teeth of the giant shark Otodus megalodon, alongside those of its mako-like relative Isurus. Mixed in are the bones of whales, dolphins, seals, sea turtles, and seabirds, predators and prey jumbled together in one dense sheet. The obvious assumption is a catastrophe, some single event that killed everything at once. The science says otherwise. In 2009, Nicholas Ponson and his colleagues studied how the bed formed. They concluded it is a condensed deposit built up over a long stretch of time during which almost no sediment was settling. Bones piled onto the seafloor faster than they could be buried, concentrating the remains of countless animals into one thin, crowded layer. It is not the record of a massacre. It is the record of an ordinary, productive sea, distilled by slow time into something that looks like a slaughter. Collectors have worked the site since the 1800s, and its fossils sit in museums around the world. Some of the megalodon teeth here exceed 10 centimeters, measured along the slant, each one a blade from a shark larger than a bus. Many of the whale bones carry shark bite marks and other feeding traces, frozen evidence of meals taken millions of years ago. The overall effect, layer upon layer of teeth and shattered bone, looks like a carpet of death rolled across the ancient seabed. For scientists, it is a priceless window into the Miocene marine ecosystem of the Pacific coast. The mixing of so many predators and so much prey in a single bed makes it both eerie and informative. Researchers still discuss the exact recipe, slow condensation as the mainstream answer, with episodic die-offs and current-driven concentration as supporting players. The next site moves from a hidden California layer to an open desert full of whales. Number 9. The Valley of the Whales. In the desert southwest of Cairo, in the Fayoum region of Egypt, whale skeletons lie scattered across the sand. The place is called Wadi al-Hitain, which in Arabic means the Valley of the Whales, and it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2005. The rocks here are late Eocene, around 37 to 40 million years old, and they preserve one of the most important records of how whales came to be. The star is Basilosaurus isis, an early, fully aquatic whale that stretched about 18 meters in a long, serpentine, eel-like body. It still carried tiny hind limbs, useless little legs that betray its descent from land-walking ancestors. Beside it lived a smaller whale, Dorudon atrox, around 5 meters long. Much of what we understand here grew from decades of work by Philip Gingerich of the University of Michigan. Then, in 2019, a study by Manja Voss, Gingerich, and colleagues turned a giant into a monster. They examined the stomach region of a Basilosaurus and found it full of bones. Inside were the remains of juvenile Dorudon, along with fish. This was direct evidence preserved across 37 million years that Basilosaurus hunted and ate the calves of other whales. The pattern hints that Wadi al-Hitain may have been a Dorudon nursery, a place where young whales were born and where Basilosaurus came to feed on them. Bite marks on Dorudon skulls match the tooth spacing of Basilosaurus, sealing the case. All of this happened in what was then a warm, shallow arm of the ancient Tethys Sea, long before the Sahara existed. Hundreds of whale skeletons are preserved across the valley, some nearly complete, lying where they sank. Around them rest the bones of sharks, sawfish, sea turtles, and sirenians, the relatives of manatees. Together, these fossils document one of the great transitions in the history of life, land mammals reshaping themselves into ocean giants. The setting only deepens the strangeness. To find an 18-meter sea creature half buried in a sand dune, hundreds of kilometers from the nearest coast, scrambles the mind. Researchers still weigh how deliberately Basilosaurus targeted calves, whether it was a focused calf killer, an opportunist, or something in between. Whatever the answer, the image of a serpentine whale cruising a vanished sea with young whales in its gut is hard to forget. And the final find is the most famous of all, and the most misunderstood. Number 10. Liopleurodon. Some prehistoric animals are famous for what they were. Liopleurodon is famous for what people imagined it to be. The real animal, Liopleurodon ferox, was a Pliosaur from the Middle to Late Jurassic, living around 160 million years ago, in the Colovian stage. Its fossils turn up across Europe, especially in England and France. The French paleontologist Henri Sauvage named it back in 1873. The name means smooth-sided tooth, a reference to the enamel on its teeth. By careful measurement of actual bones, Liopleurodon reached about 5 to 7 meters with a maximum near 6.4 meters. It was a capable predator with 4 strong flippers, a large head, and rows of conical teeth, a serious hunter of Jurassic seas. Then, in 1999, the BBC series Walking with Dinosaurs put it on screen at a staggering 25 meters, a creature of around 150 tons. That size has no support whatsoever in the fossil record. It came from speculative extrapolation, stretching fragmentary hints far past what the bones allow. But it was unforgettable television, and the image stuck. Almost overnight, Liopleurodon became one of the most famous sea reptiles in the world, and one of the most misunderstood. The confusion deepened thanks to another fossil, the so-called monster of Aramberi, a juvenile plesiosaur from Mexico. Sensational reports claimed that animal reached 15 meters or more, and it was sometimes lumped together with Liopleurodon in the public imagination. Later study questioned both the identifications and the inflated sizes. Back in reality, Liopleurodon's flipper proportions suggest a steady, efficient cruiser, rather than a sudden sprinter. It likely tracked prey using a sharp sense of smell, with water flowing through separated nostril passages to give it a directional sense of scent in the water. It hunted fish, cephalopods, and smaller marine reptiles across the European seas. The gap between the genuine animal and the towering legend is the perfect place to end, because it captures the whole theme of this journey. Again and again, the ocean's real monsters strain our sense of scale and possibility. And again, the stories we tell about them stretch even further, until the line between fossil and myth begins to blur. The truth is that we do not need the exaggerations. The real animals were astonishing enough. Why the sea keeps producing such giants, in lineage after unrelated lineage, is a question worth sitting with. Step back from the individual animals and a pattern emerges that is almost unsettling in its persistence. The ocean keeps building giants, over and over in branches of life that are not even related. Ichthyosaurs did it. Pliosaurs and Plesiosaurs did it. Tens of millions of years later, whales did it. The reason starts with water itself. Buoyancy supports enormous body mass that would crush a land animal under its own weight. A blue whale could not stand on land. The sea carries it. Add to that the warm-bloodedness of marine reptiles and mammals, and rich productive food webs, and you have the fuel for extreme size. There's also the matter of the empty throne. After every mass extinction, the role of top marine predator sits vacant, and life rushes to fill it. Thalattoarchon filled it in the Triassic. Predator X filled it in the Jurassic. Basilosaurus and later the giant shark Megalodon filled it in the Age of Mammals. The same niche, occupied by one unrelated lineage after another. Filter-feeding giants recur too, from certain ichthyosaurs to today's baleen whales, both straining tiny prey from the water at massive scale. Biologists sometimes point to a broad tendency, often linked to Cope's rule, for lineages to trend toward larger body size over time. The hard limit is food. Oceanic productivity, the sheer amount of life the sea can grow, sets the ceiling on how many giants it can feed. Temperature and oxygen levels matter as well, shaping how large a cold-blooded or warm-blooded animal can become. Plate tectonics plays its part, opening and closing seaways, isolating faunas, and redirecting the currents that drive upwelling. Those upwelling zones where deep nutrients rise to the surface are the engines of marine biomass, and giants cluster where the food is richest. Mass extinctions reset the entire board, and the Triassic example shows how fast the pieces can return, an apex predator rebuilt in around 8 million years. Gigantism is both a triumph and a trap. The same size that makes an animal dominant also makes it vulnerable when the climate turns or the food collapses. The modern blue whale is simply the current holder of a very old title. The repeated silhouettes, the long neck, the massive head, the streamlined giant are the sea writing the same solutions again and again. Those solutions only reach us, though, because of a second improbable process, the rare chance that a body becomes stone. Every fossil in this story is a small miracle of preservation, because the default fate of a dead animal is to vanish completely. Most are eaten, scattered, and dissolved, leaving nothing. The monsters we have met survived only because conditions happened to be exactly right. The most common recipe is rapid burial in low-oxygen mud on the seafloor. Without oxygen, the scavengers and bacteria that normally destroy a carcass cannot do their work. Fine black shales and silts settling slowly in still water can capture astonishing detail, down to skin outlines and stomach contents. This is why the Tanystropheus and the Triassic Ichthyosaurs of Monte San Giorgio are preserved so beautifully, but preservation is deeply biased. Sharks like Edestus are built from cartilage, which almost never fossilizes, so an entire animal is reduced to a record of teeth. Bone beds form in their own ways, either by sudden mass burial or, as at Sharktooth Hill, by slow condensation over ages of low sedimentation. An articulated skeleton with bones still in life position tells a different story than a scattered jumble, and scientists read both. Sometimes minerals replace the original material entirely, as in the rainbow ammolite of the Corate mines, where Albertonectes was found. The richest sites, called Lagerstätten, preserve whole communities in fine detail. Occasionally a fossil captures behavior itself, a last meal in the gut, like the whale calf inside Basilosaurus, or bite marks recording a predator's strike. Then comes the slow machinery of geology. Ancient seabeds are uplifted into mountains and deserts, which is why whales now lie in the Egyptian sand and ichthyosaurs rest in the mountains of Nevada. Erosion finishes the job, exposing fossils at cliffs and quarries where sharp-eyed collectors like Paul de la Salle can find them. Commercial mining, dug for gems or coal, turns up specimens by accident. Skulls are often the casualties, delicate and easily lost, which is why both Albertonectes and many elasmosaurs reach us headless. modern tools change everything. Computed tomography scanning lets researchers rebuild crushed skulls, as with Tanystropheus, and chemical isotopes locked in bone reveal diet and water temperature. Yet the bias remains. Shallow seas preserve well, while the deep ocean floor is steadily dragged down and destroyed by plate tectonics, erasing whole chapters. Our picture of prehistoric oceans is assembled from these lucky survivors, and that incompleteness shapes everything we think we know. For all the certainty in a museum label, the study of prehistoric oceans is full of mistakes, revisions, and honest gaps. The Liopleurodon size myth is the clearest warning. A single dramatic documentary turned a 7-meter predator into a 25-meter legend, and the public memory never fully corrected. Fragmentary fossils invite exactly this kind of overreach. The Lilstock Giant, known from one jaw fragment, gives a thrilling size estimate, but an honest scientist admits the bone may be too incomplete to be sure. The kraken hypothesis is another lesson, an idea so untestable that it cannot really be science at all, however fun it is to imagine. Even basic things stay unknown. We rarely know the true color or skin appearance of these animals. Their behavior is inferred indirectly from tooth shape, bone structure, and rare gut contents, and much of it remains argued over. Those famous bite force numbers, like the figure once attached to Predator X, are outputs of models built on assumptions, not measurements taken from a living jaw. Missing skulls, as with Albertonectes, leave whole questions about feeding unanswered. Sometimes the errors are about identity itself. For years, two sizes of Tanystropheus were thought to be young and old of one species, until bone growth rings revealed two separate species. The os cliff bones were misread as dinosaur limbs for a century and a half before being recognized as Ichthyosaur jaws. Media amplification makes all of this worse, spreading the most exciting version of a story far faster than the careful correction that follows. The encouraging part is that science is built to catch its own mistakes. New technology, like the scanning that rebuilt the Tanystropheus skull, overturns old conclusions. Peer review and replication test bold claims. Researchers return to dusty museum drawers and find that specimens collected long ago still have secrets to give. Naming and renaming, far from being a weakness, is the visible trace of understanding improving in real time. There's a constant tension between caution and storytelling, between the urge to say something thrilling and the duty to say only what the evidence supports. The healthiest answer a scientist can give is often simply, "We do not know yet." Distinguishing a testable hypothesis from an untestable fantasy is the core of the discipline. Honest uncertainty does not weaken the picture of these ancient seas. It is what makes the picture trustworthy. And it leaves room for wonder, especially when you try to stand these creatures next to yourself. Numbers on a page can numb you. The real shock comes when you place these animals beside things you understand. Imagine the Lilstock Giant, an Ichthyosaur estimated at up to 26 meters, lined up against a modern blue whale, the two nearly matched, separated by 200 million years of evolution. Picture the skull of Predator X, around 2 meters long, hanging over you, its jaws wide enough to take a person whole. Hold a megalodon tooth from Sharktooth Hill in your palm and find it larger than your hand. Stretch out the neck of Albertonectes, and it runs longer than a school bus, 76 vertebrae from shoulder to skull. The neck of Tanystropheus was longer than its entire body, a living fishing rod of bone. Basilosaurus, end to end, would span much of a tennis court. These comparisons are not just for drama. They are how the mind finally grasps a scale it was never built to hold. And many of these animals are not locked away. You can stand among the Shonnosaurus skeletons at Berlin Ichthyosaur State Park in Nevada, where they still lie in the rock under a protective shelter. You can walk the trails of Wadi al-Hitan in Egypt, an open-air museum where whale skeletons rest in the desert. The fossils of Monte San Giorgio fill UNESCO-protected collections in Switzerland and Italy. A well-built museum mount does something a number cannot. It puts the animal in the room with you, and the body remembers fear even when the mind knows the creature is long dead. Today's whales carry this deep history forward, the living heirs of 100 million years of marine giants. And the ocean that produced all of them is still the planet's largest habitat and its least explored. Vast stretches of the deep sea floor have never been mapped in detail. It is entirely possible that fossils larger than anything yet found are waiting in rock we have not yet split open. Again and again, it is not professional expeditions, but ordinary people, walking a beach or working a mine, who rewrite the records. That is part of why these animals still feel mythic. They sit at the exact border between the measurable and the unimaginable, and standing there, at that border, is the right place to ask what all of it finally means. Every find in this journey is a fragment of a lost ocean world, a single page torn from a book that mostly no longer exists. Put the pages together, and a strange truth comes into focus. The sea has built its monsters, erased them, and built them again, over and over, across hundreds of millions of years. Extinction in this long view is not only an ending, it is also a reset, the clearing that makes the next wave of giants possible. The deep past reaches us only by accident, through the rare bodies that happen to become stone instead of dust. Everything we believe about these vanished seas is a sketch drawn from scattered bones, confident in places, blank in others. That is why each new specimen carries such weight. A single jaw on a beach can add 10 meters to our sense of what was possible. A scan of a crushed skull can settle a debate that ran for a century. Technology keeps reopening cases we thought were closed, and it will keep doing so long after us. Through all of it runs a thin and important line, the line between careful science and seductive legend. Liopleurodon teaches that the line is easy to cross and worth guarding, not because the truth is small, but because the truth is already overwhelming. These animals strain comprehension on their own terms, with no exaggeration required. The terror and the wonder they provoke turn out to be the same feeling, the vertigo of confronting something vast and real and gone. What they finally testify to is the resilience of life, its stubborn habit of filling every empty throne the ocean offers. And the ocean still hides most of its own history, in trenches and on seafloors we have barely begun to touch. More discoveries are certain, their shapes are not. That makes you, watching now, a partner in an investigation that is nowhere near finished. Picture one last image, a giant cruising silently through a sea that no longer exists, its world entirely erased except for the bones it left behind. Reality, in the end, is stranger than the myths we build to contain it. The bones are still out there, waiting in the rock. And the enormity of what remains unknown is, perhaps, the most terrifying find of all.